Hello and welcome to Part1 Analysis. I'm Kaveh Taghvai. NATO's military involvement in Libya has lasted 3 months, and yet Gaddafi is defiantly holding on to power. A recent NATO airstrike has killed 15 people, among them 3 children. Revolutionaries say NATO has failed to protect the civilians, and anti-war sentiments keep growing in the United States and some other member states of the military alliance. What is NATO's game plan in Libya?
NATO has for the first time admitted that civilians were killed in its air raids targeting the Libyan capital Tripoli. NATO claims that its airstrike on Sunday morning missed its intended target. The Libyan government says at least 9 people, including toddlers, were killed in that attack. Libyan officials say NATO has killed hundreds of civilians during its ongoing military campaign in the country. NATO has been conducting air raids in Tripoli since late March. The UN-mandated mission of the Western Alliance is to save civilian lives, but Libyans say the Western military alliance has failed to achieve this goal. Despite the economic downturn, the U.S. has so far contributed almost $1 billion to NATO's mission in Libya. The UK is also burning £6 million a week bombing the war-torn country. Analysts say the Western alliance is trying to split Libya in two. One part will go to their old pal Gaddafi, while the oil-rich other will be given to the West's Libyan allies. NATO keeps bombing Tripoli and even some advancing revolutionary units in what some see as a bid to keep the stalemate in place. But it is not clear how long the alliance can continue to attempt to keep the war going.
A lot of topics on the Libyan war does remain unclear. Let me introduce our guests for this news analysis. We have from London, Lizzie Phelan, who's a journalist, joining us. From Beirut, Dr. Ziad al-Hafez, who's the Secretary General of the Arab Nationalist Forum. And rounding off the list from Washington, Michael Maloof, who's a former Pentagon officer. I want to thank all my guests. Let me go to London first and ask you, Lizzie Phelan, about this NATO strike. It has killed civilians, and they have blamed technical error. So to make a conclusion out of that is, A, if that happens, it may happen again, so there's a risk of civilian casualties. And also, this NATO air campaign, do you think that it has actually gone too far when it is not saving lives?
Hi, thank you for having me. Yet again, we are seeing what the US and Europe shamefully call collateral damage in the form of human lives, like we have seen previously in Iraq and Afghanistan and in many other parts of the world. And really, this apology by NATO, it's an absolute joke. It's the first apology that we've had in 3 months, despite the fact that civilians have been dying at the hands of NATO airstrikes every day in the past 3 months. There have been thousands of strikes on the country. So they made the apology yesterday on Sunday, and then again today at 2 o'clock in the morning, there was yet another attack on the city of Sorman, just 130 kilometers west of Tripoli, where a further 15 civilians were killed and a further 3 children were killed. And then in the previous weeks, we have seen the bombing of Al-Nasser University in Tripoli in the daytime, where civilians were killed. And they're saying that so these are the military targets that we're seeing them bomb. We're seeing them bomb universities. We're seeing them bomb Friday Market Street in Tripoli, where there is no military site in the area. There's the street, Friday Market Street. I've been there. It begins with the GP office and it ends with a primary school. And then they bomb 4 buildings and kill 9 civilians, including a toddler 4 months old. So yet again, we are seeing what humanitarian intervention and the protection of civilians a la NATO means. It means the killing of children, as we are seeing. So, you know, the real crime here is the crime of the media. Where has the media been? The media's picked up on this now because NATO has made their apology, but we've been seeing civilians dying every day, as I said, for the past 3 months. We have a swarm of Western journalists based in Tripoli.
Well, let me bring in Michael Maloof, if I may jump in. Michael Maloof, do you have an answer for that in terms of the Western media, where it's been? The Western media has accused the government of exaggerating the numbers, but as our guest there in London has said, does that seem viable enough now? When we really look at what has occurred with these strikes, I mean, in terms of the sorties, 13,000 and then 4,000 airstrikes, well, common sense dictates that if you drop an ordnance in the middle of a crowded residential area, there are going to be civilian casualties, aren't there?
Well, yes. Well, again, thanks for having me. It's the whole NATO effort is running into some very serious problems. It is killing innocent people, and it's my understanding that that they were keeping an eye on the facility for at least a few days before they actually bombed it, and knowing that there were that it was a family compound and that there were women and children at the compound. So there's absolutely no excuse for what had occurred, and indeed the whole NATO effort now seems to be hitting more and more civilians. I think it's losing its what its intended purpose was. The NATO effort should stop, and there should be efforts to try and sit down with Gaddafi and talk to him if he'll talk at this point. Chances are he probably won't. But it looks like the NATO initiative is failing, and there's squabbling within NATO itself, and that's not conducive to an effective effort on their part. I think that in time, the UN's going to have to step in and do something much more serious about this to try to get parties together. Particularly, the Arab League ought to be working on this and trying to get people to sit down and talk. Nothing is being accomplished at this point.
Well, you talk about the Arab League, Dr. Ziad al-Hafez. What about it? What about this juncture after 3 months of, 2 months entering the third month of the NATO air raids, 4 months since the uprising has begun in Libya? Isn't it time for a political solution? As Russia has indicated, as China has said, is NATO actually ready for that, or does NATO want that?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking your guest in London or in the States. If I understand your question well, I think the whole issue of the mission of NATO is to be reviewed from the Arab League gave a mandate, unfortunately, to NATO to come and enforce a no-fly zone over Libya. That was the original mandate, and suddenly the mandate was extended to other operations, and actually they're trying to control the flow of the rebellion or the insurgency in Libya, as long as the new transitional council or those who speak on behalf of the insurgents are not willing to give whatever guarantees NATO or is asking from them. Today, if the same question is to be put again to the Arab League, I'm not sure you would get that kind of mandate alone. So in this respect, the NATO operation in Libya has absolutely no coverage, no support whatsoever in Arab countries. Even at the official level, the silence that you have is really quite revealing. However, their press, even they're controlled by the states, is showing clearly that NATO is not doing what it was supposed to do, or they thought they were supposed to do. But in fact, the original mission, the real mission of NATO was really to stop the flow of what we call the Arab Spring, or the kind of revolution, to transform it from a peaceful mass demonstration to overthrow regimes into a bloody civil war. And the intervention of NATO has been quite harmful in this respect. It is calibrating, so to speak, its strikes one day on behalf of the insurgency, another day on behalf of Mr. Gaddafi,
right.
And that's the whole tragedy of it. I mean, at best, if you want to be kind, you would say
let's look at an example. Let's look at an example of NATO.
Criminal.
Dr. Ziad al-Hafez, let me refer to an example of NATO that I have that has admitted that it was probably responsible for the humanitarian liberation of 9 Libyan civilians, plus 18 injured via an early morning strike at an apartment building in which liberating North Africans in their sleep under tons of debris now adds to NATO's achievements and the Pentagon's in terms of a routine liberation. Lizzie Phelan, I mean, in terms of what NATO is exercising, it does put into question what is indeed the goals that NATO has on the ground. I mean, we're trying to understand here and the rest of the world when it comes to what is being exercised on the ground. And this comes when there are CIA officers, when there are covert operators, as it's been reported, that are on the ground in touch with the revolutionaries.
Well, sorry, I wouldn't call anybody who is inviting NATO or the CIA or intelligence services into their country revolutionaries. With all due respect, they are in fact counter-revolutionaries. So what is the purpose? The purpose is clear. The purpose from the outset, as the brother from Beirut said, is to curb the Arab Spring, but also it goes back further than that. The West has basically, since the revolution of the Jamahiriya in 1969, since Gaddafi kicked out the British and the Americans and closed the military bases and nationalized the oil, the West has always had an agenda since then to get back into Libya and take complete control of the oil resources. They've had, a period of rapprochement with Libya whereby they have been able to make some good deals with Libya, but they haven't had anywhere near the kind of control that they would like to have, like they have in Saudi Arabia or Qatar or the other Gulfi states, where these are effectively client regimes. So the agenda is clear: to completely violate international law and assassinate Gaddafi against the will of the Libyan people, without actually ever asking them what it is that the Libyan people want.
Well, perhaps.